Fix my Lamborghini. You can't. That's what the rich heiress scoffed when her luxury supercar stalled at the exclusive Briarwood Country Club. She mocked the mechanic and his teenage daughter, Maya Hayes, as if they were out of their depth. But in less than an hour, Maya uncovered the hidden fault that 3 certified specialists couldn't find. This isn't just a story about how to fix my Lamborghini. It's about how a determined young girl proved that skill beats status every time. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. The trouble had begun just after sunrise, when Isabella Monroe eased her flawless pearl-white Lamborghini Huracan Evo into the private parking court of Briarwood Estate and Country Club, the kind of place where memberships passed from one generation to the next. And the annual fee could rival a year's salary for most people. She had come, wrapped in couture and confidence, to deliver a keynote on self-made success to a select gathering of young socialites and heirs. In truth, her fortune had poured down from her family's luxury resort empire, without a single sleepless night of building it herself. The Lamborghini's V10 had sung like an exotic predator during the drive from her oceanfront villa, the sort of machine that belonged on Monaco's streets, not winding through the quiet hills of New England. Briarwood, with its marble colonnades and manicured gardens, radiated the kind of exclusivity that made strangers feel like intruders. Isabella, only 25, embodied its every ideal elegance honed by privilege, beauty maintained by the best money could buy. But on this golden October morning, beneath the crisp air scented with fallen leaves and polished mahogany, a single, unexpected moment was about to pierce the glossy surface of her world, and nothing she believed about status or skill would remain untouched. The presentation had gone exactly as Isabella had imagined, polished, polite, and received with the kind of smiles that said, "We're all the same here." She spoke about taking risks and following your passion without mentioning that her biggest risk had been choosing between a penthouse in Paris or a villa in Amalfi. By the time the last polite laugh faded, she was already thinking about the feel of the Lamborghini's leather seat and the hum of the V10 as she drove home. But when she pressed the start button, the car gave nothing more than a muted click and a flicker of dashboard lights. She tried again. Same result. The smile faltered on her perfectly glossed lips. From across the manicured courtyard, Franklin Hayes had been setting up maintenance equipment near the club's west terrace. At 50, with broad shoulders and hands scarred from decades of mechanical work, he was the kind of man who blended into the background at places like Briarwood. Most members never noticed him unless something broke. He approached at a measured pace. "Morning. Ma'am, sounds like you might have an electrical issue. If you'd like, I can take a quick look." Isabella turned toward him slowly, her gaze sweeping over his navy work shirt with the club's crest stitched above the pocket. "You work?" Here she asked. "Yes, ma'am. Head mechanic for the club. I've worked on a fair share of—" She laughed, not cruelly loud, but just enough for a couple of lingering guests to glance over. "You think this is the same as fixing a golf cart or the club's lawn mowers? This is a Lamborghini." Her voice softened into something sweetly poisonous. "I'll wait for someone qualified." Franklin's jaw tightened, but he only gave a short nod and stepped back. An hour later, a specialist from the nearest exotic dealership arrived in a glossy service van. He plugged in his diagnostics, frowned, unplugged, tried again. Power's flowing to the system, but something's stopping the startup sequence. I've never seen this pattern before. A second technician followed. Then a third, each with more advanced equipment, each leaving with the same conclusion: the problem was there, but invisible to their scans. Isabella grew impatient, checking her phone, tossing clipped remarks about how someone will have to tow it to Boston at this rate. That's when a quieter voice cut through the tension. "It's your ground connection," the voice said. "Secondary chassis ground by the control module. Corrosion inside the joint." Isabella turned sharply. Standing near the edge of the courtyard was Maya Hayes, Franklin's 17-year-old daughter. She wore faded jeans and a work shirt 2 sizes too big. Sleeves rolled past her elbows, a smudge of grease on her cheek. Isabella's brows lifted. "And you are?" "Maya, I help my dad in the machine shop." "Oh." Isabella's lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "That's adorable. But unless you've been moonlighting at Lamborghini's design headquarters, I think I'll stick with the experts." She glanced at the technicians, raising her voice so the nearby members could hear. "Gentlemen, I believe we've got the apprentice from Hayes and Daughter's tractor repair here to save the day." A couple of them chuckled politely. One of the techs looked uncomfortable. Maya's voice stayed even. "Your specialists checked all the visible grounds, but there's one tucked 18 inches forward of the rear axle on the passenger side. You can't see it without dropping the underbody panel. When humidity gets in, it creates micro-resistance. The car thinks it's unsafe to start." Robert Kane, the oldest of the 3 technicians, straightened from the open engine bay. "That's specific. Because it's the only ground on that side without redundancy." Maya said, "Ferrari, McLaren, Lamborghini, they all assume it'll never fail. But it can. And when it does, it looks like your problem." The silence that followed was taut. Robert knelt, flashlight in hand, and slid under the car. The crowd leaned slightly forward. After a minute, his voice emerged, tinged with surprise. "She's right. Looks fine outside, but there's corrosion inside the joint, enough to throw the system off completely." No one laughed now. Isabella's face flushed faintly, though whether from the October air or something sharper was hard to tell. Maya stepped back beside her father, who met her eyes with a quiet pride that said he wasn't surprised at all. For Isabella, the moment was a hairline fracture in a lifetime of certainty. The daughter of the club's mechanic had just solved what 3 certified specialists couldn't, and the heiress, who had thought expertise came packaged in a title and an invoice, suddenly saw it standing in worn sneakers, holding a socket wrench. She didn't yet realize it, but that fracture in her assumptions was about to split wide open. Robert Kane slid back out from beneath the Lamborghini, wiping his hands on a clean rag as though buying time to process what he'd just found. "Corrosion's in the contact area," he said, glancing at Maya with the kind of reluctant respect that mechanics reserve for someone who's just outdiagnosed them. "It'd take me an hour just to get that panel off." Maya shook her head. 20 minutes if you don't overcomplicate it." She turned toward her father. "Dad, we've got the tools in the shop." "Right." Franklin's mouth curved into the faintest smile. "Always." Isabella, still standing beside the car with her arms crossed, let out a disbelieving laugh. "Oh, no. This is where I draw the line. You're not experimenting on my car. It's a Lamborghini, not a high school science project." She turned to Robert. "You're not seriously considering letting her—" Robert cut in gently. "Ma'am, with respect. She's already identified the fault more precisely than any of us have today. And the truth is, it's not brain surgery. It's cleaning a ground connection." Isabella's eyes narrowed. "And if she ruins something—" Franklin finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "If she does, I'll pay for the replacement myself." But she won't. Something in his certainty made Robert nod. "All right, Maya, show us." They rolled the Lamborghini onto one of the club's service lifts, rarely used for anything beyond a Rolls-Royce oil change. As the underbody panel came down, Maya's hands moved with the quick precision of someone who knew exactly what lay beneath. She didn't waste time admiring the Italian engineering. She treated it the same way she would a farm truck, focusing on the problem, not the pedigree. "There," she said, pointing to a metal contact bolted to the chassis rail. To the untrained eye, it looked immaculate. But Maya had already unfastened the bolt and peeled back the contact pad, revealing a delicate bloom of green corrosion hidden inside. "Moisture seeped in from here," she explained. "The resistance is just enough to confuse the control module during startup. Once it's running, the alternator compensates, so you don't notice." She cleaned the joint with a wire brush, then treated it with a corrosion inhibitor. The movements were calm, unhurried, the same way her father taught her to work slow enough to get it right the first time. The entire process took 18 minutes. Robert tested the connection with his multimeter. The readout held steady. "Perfect," he murmured. Franklin gave a small nod toward Isabella. "Go ahead. Start it." Isabella hesitated, her manicured fingers hovering over the start button. She pressed it. The Lamborghini's V10 roared to life in a single, seamless breath, every light on the dash glowing in perfect synchrony. The sound was intoxicating, but the silence that followed was heavier. A few club members who had lingered to watch shifted uncomfortably, as though they had witnessed something intimate, the shattering of an unspoken hierarchy. Maya stepped back, wiping her hands on a shop rag. "It'll run fine now. Just keep it away from salt spray and have the ground inspected every couple of years." Isabella stared at her. Something complicated in her expression, gratitude tangled with embarrassment. "You fixed it." Maya shrugged lightly. "It's just a ground connection. Anybody who understands the system could have done it." The words were simple, but in Isabella's ears, they carried an edge because she knew not anybody could have done it. 3 certified specialists had stood in the same spot and failed, and she had mocked the one person who could. Robert broke the tension. "Miss Hayes," he said, using her name with professional weight. "If you're ever looking for work, my shop could use someone with your diagnostic skills." Maya glanced at her father, who gave her a barely there nod. "I'm still in school," she said. "But maybe someday." As the crowd dispersed, Isabella lingered by the car, her hands resting on the steering wheel. The engine's smooth purr felt different now, not because the car had changed, but because she had. She looked toward Franklin and Maya, who were packing up tools. The image burned into her mind of father and daughter, working side by side, perfectly in sync. No marble lobby, no tailored speech, no inherited title, just skill, earned and proven. "Thank you," she said finally, stepping toward them. "Both of you." Maya gave a small smile. "Glad I could help?" Franklin only nodded, but his eyes softened. As Isabella drove away, the Lamborghini's reflection catching in the club's tall windows, she felt the strange weight of knowing she'd been wrong and that a lesson had just been handed to her, not from a podium, but from beneath her own car, and somewhere deep down. She suspected it was the kind of lesson she would remember far longer than anything she had said in her speech that morning. For the rest of the drive home, the Lamborghini's V10 sang exactly as it should have that morning, smooth, confident, untouchable. But Isabella couldn't enjoy it. Every time she glanced at the polished leather, she saw Maya's grease-smudged hands working in patient, precise motions. Every time she shifted gears, she remembered Franklin's calm, unshakable voice. "She won't ruin it." The truth was simple and uncomfortable. She'd been wrong. Not just about the repair, but about the people she'd dismissed without a second thought. That evening, she stood on the balcony of her oceanfront villa, the last of the day's light sinking into the horizon. The rhythmic crash of waves should have soothed her. Instead, she found herself replaying the scene in the Briarwood courtyard, the way her own laughter had hung in the air, sharp, dismissive, and how it must have felt to be on the receiving end. Her world had been built on certainty, the certainty that money bought the best, that the best came with credentials, and that credentials came from the same elite circles she'd always known. Maya had dismantled that in less than 20 minutes, with nothing more than a wrench and the confidence of someone who knew. Later that week, Isabella returned to Briarwood for a charity luncheon. She spotted Franklin in the distance, repairing a piece of groundskeeping equipment. The temptation to walk past was strong to pretend the awkwardness had faded, but something stopped her. "Mr. Hayes," she called. He looked up, not surprised, not cold, just waiting. "I've been thinking about what happened," she began, realizing how inadequate the words sounded. "I didn't just underestimate your daughter. I underestimated you both." Franklin gave a faint shrug. "Most people do. It's easier to believe skill comes with a title." That night, unable to shake the feeling that she owed more than a passing apology, Isabella did something she hadn't done in years. She looked beyond her circle. She researched Franklin's garage work outside the club, how he'd kept it open for locals even when profit margins were razor thin, how he'd trained Maya in diagnostics from the time she could walk. 2 weeks later, she found herself back at the club's service bay, a plain envelope in her hand. Franklin was tightening the bolts on a golf cart's motor. Maya stood nearby, sorting tools. "This isn't charity," Isabella said, handing the envelope to Maya. "It's an invitation. There's a youth engineering competition in Boston next month, high-level, real-world problem-solving. I've already covered the entry fee. You should be there." Maya blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Why?" "Because you belong in rooms where people recognize what you can do," Isabella replied. "And because I was wrong to think you didn't." For the first time since that morning in the courtyard, Maya's guarded expression cracked into something warmer. She took the envelope. "All right, I'll think about it." As Isabella turned to leave, Franklin's voice stopped her. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know," she replied, "but I needed to." Driving away, Isabella realized the Lamborghini felt different beneath her hands, not mechanically, but in meaning. It was no longer just a symbol of her status. It was a reminder of the day someone she had underestimated taught her more about worth than any boardroom ever had. And for the first time, she understood that the road ahead, the one worth taking, might not be paved in marble, but in humility. The envelope sat on Maya's desk for 3 days before she opened it. She'd read the front enough times to know every curve of her own name in Isabella's looping handwriting. Inside was a glossy brochure for the Boston Youth Engineering Challenge, along with a registration confirmation and a note. "Your skill belongs on a bigger stage. Go show them." Maya wasn't the type to chase attention. Most of her victories happened in the quiet corners of Franklin's workshop, where no one clapped, and the only applause came from an engine finally purring after hours of stubborn silence. But the idea of testing herself against the best kids from elite schools with custom-built labs tugged at something inside her. Franklin noticed her lingering over the brochure one evening. "You're thinking about it," he said. "Not as a question." "I'd stick out like a sore thumb," she admitted. "Those kids have equipment I've only seen in magazines. Half of them probably built their first robot before kindergarten." Franklin wiped his hands on a rag. "And yet, you're the one who fixed a Lamborghini in under 20 minutes. Tools don't make the mechanic. Maya, brains and patience do." By the end of the week, she was in. The competition was held in a sprawling convention center, all glass walls and echoing atriums. Teams bustled around tables piled with sleek metal parts and laptops covered in tech stickers. Maya arrived with nothing but her small toolkit, a laptop with a cracked corner, and Franklin's old leather satchel. The first challenge was deceptively simple: build a functioning prototype that could navigate an obstacle course using only the provided materials. Maya's team assigned at random included 2 students from an exclusive Boston prep school and 1 from a tech magnet program in New York. Their leader, a boy named Carter with perfectly combed hair, glanced at her toolkit and smirked. "Let me guess," he said. "You've done this kind of thing in shop class." Maya didn't bother correcting him. She just started sketching on the provided blueprint paper, breaking down the challenge into steps. By mid-morning, it was clear her plan worked. While other teams fought with overcomplicated designs, Maya's team glided through assembly, each part fitting like it had been meant to all along. Even Carter stopped questioning her. The final challenge was the kind that separated the dabblers from the diehards diagnose and repair a deliberately sabotaged engine system. The twist: the system was modeled after a hybrid performance car's architecture eerily similar to the Lamborghini's. Maya's pulse quickened as she scanned the wiring. She spotted the issue in under 5 minutes, but instead of shouting it out, she guided her teammates through the process of finding it themselves. By the time the engine roared to life, the judges were already nodding to each other. When the results were announced, Maya's team placed first. The win came with more than a trophy. It came with invitations. Representatives from engineering programs, apprenticeships, and even a performance automotive lab approached her with business cards and promises of opportunities to discuss. Isabella was there too. She had kept her word, showing up quietly at the back of the hall when Maya stepped down from the stage, still holding the trophy. Isabella approached. "You didn't just show them," she said with a rare, genuine smile. "You showed me." Maya glanced at the trophy, then back at Isabella. "Guess I owed you for the entry fee." Isabella shook her head. "No, I owed you for the lesson. I'm just glad I got to return the favor." As they left the convention center, Franklin's hand rested lightly on Maya's shoulder. "You see," he said, "bigger stage. Same tools. You belonged here all along." For the first time, Maya believed him, and somewhere deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The weeks after the Boston Youth Engineering Challenge moved quickly. For Maya, life at Briarwood and the small workshop with Franklin felt both the same and entirely different. The same because she still spent afternoons with her hands buried in engines, still took her father's quiet lessons to heart. Different because now, her phone buzzed with emails from engineering mentors, scholarship committees, and even one racing team offering a summer internship. Franklin didn't say much about the offers. He simply slid each printed email across the workbench with a raised brow, letting her decide. "Opportunities," he said one evening as he tightened a stubborn bolt, "are just tools. You choose which ones to pick up." Meanwhile, Isabella found herself thinking about the Hayes family more than she expected. The heiress who once delivered speeches about self-made success began noticing how little she had actually built herself. She still moved through the polished halls of Briarwood with the same confident stride, but she caught herself listening differently when staff spoke, asking questions instead of giving directives. One afternoon, she drove the Lamborghini back to the club, this time on purpose, and this time running perfectly. Franklin was repairing one of the club's service carts, Maya beside him. Isabella walked up, holding a small box. "I was in Milan last week," she began, "and saw this, thought it might belong here." Inside the box was a precision torque wrench, the kind used in professional race teams, engraved with the initials M. H. Maya's eyes widened. "This is expensive." Isabella smiled faintly. "So was the lesson you gave me. Consider it an investment." From that day, their conversations shifted. Maya began asking Isabella about business strategy, about networking, about how to navigate rooms where her name carried no weight, but her work might. Isabella, in turn, asked about engines, diagnostics, and the quiet patience that came with mechanical work. One autumn evening, as the sun dipped low over Briarwood's gardens, Maya leaned against the workshop doorway. "You know," she said to Isabella, "when I first saw you that day, I thought you'd be the last person to listen to me." "You weren't wrong," Isabella admitted, smiling. "But you didn't just fix my car. You cracked open the idea that I already knew everything worth knowing. That's harder to fix than a ground connection." Franklin, listening from the workbench, didn't say a word. But his eyes held a quiet pride, not just for his daughter's skill, but for the way she was learning to navigate a world far beyond their small garage. By winter, Maya had accepted a part-time role at a performance automotive lab in Boston, splitting her time between school, the lab, and the garage. Isabella had started funding a scholarship at the club for children of staff, something she would have dismissed as not her responsibility before. They were different people than they had been on that crisp October morning when a dead Lamborghini had brought them together. Maya was stepping into a future she'd only half believed was possible. Isabella was finally building something of her own, not from inheritance, but from the choice to value skill over status. And in that growth, they had given each other something neither could have found alone. The first snow of winter dusted the rooftops of Briarwood Estate, softening the sharp lines of marble and steel. In the early morning quiet, Maya stood outside the club's workshop, watching her breath curl into the air. The Lamborghini she had once been forbidden to touch sat in the corner of the lot, its pearl-white paint catching the pale light. This time, it wasn't broken. It was waiting. Franklin emerged from inside, carrying a thermos of coffee and a spare set of gloves. "She's here," he said simply, nodding toward the entrance. Isabella's arrival was quieter than usual. No sweeping entrance, no audience. She was dressed simply in a winter coat and boots that had clearly walked through snow. In her hands was a manila folder. "I'm leaving for Europe next month," she said as she approached. "But before I go, I wanted to give you something." She handed the folder to Maya. Inside were papers, official and unmistakable, a full scholarship to an advanced engineering program in Boston, sponsored under Isabella's name. Maya stared at the pages. Her breath caught. "I can't take this. It's too much." "It's not charity," Isabella said. "It's repayment for a lesson I'll never forget." She glanced at Franklin. "Your father taught you skill. You taught me humility. I'm just making sure you have the stage you deserve." Franklin's eyes softened, though his voice was steady. "If you want it, Maya, take it. The work will still be here when you come back." The moment hung in the cold air, a fragile thread between three lives that had intersected by chance and changed forever because of it. Maya finally nodded, clutching the folder to her chest. That afternoon, Isabella asked for one last drive before she left. Franklin tossed Maya the keys. "Your turn," he said. Maya slid into the driver's seat. Hands settling on the leather wheel, Isabella sat beside her, the woman who had once dismissed her as a hobbyist, now trusting her with something priceless. The V10 came alive at the push of a button, its roar no longer a symbol of wealth alone, but of possibility. They drove through the winding roads outside Briarwood, the snow-capped hills rolling past. Conversation came easily now about engines, about travel, about the strange way life could shift in a single morning. As the club came back into view, Isabella turned to her. That day, I thought I was teaching. Turns out, I was the one in the classroom. Maya smiled faintly. Life's funny that way. Sometimes the lesson's hiding under a panel you've never looked under. When they parked, Franklin was waiting, leaning against the workshop door. Isabella stepped out and extended her hand to him. He took it without hesitation. "Take care of her," she said, tilting her head toward Maya. "Always," Franklin replied. The Lamborghini's engine cooled in the quiet, steam rising faintly into the winter air. It had started as a machine, a possession, a point of pride. But for all three of them, it had become something else entirely, the unlikely bridge between worlds, proof that skill could shatter assumptions and that respect could grow where judgment once lived. As Isabella's car disappeared beyond the gates, Maya stood with her father, the scholarship folder still warm in her hands. The road ahead was uncertain, but she no longer doubted her place on it. Somewhere in the distance, the snow kept falling, covering the town in a clean, unbroken sheet, a reminder that beginnings often come disguised as endings, and that sometimes the smallest connection can start the biggest change. Anyone can master the road if they're willing to work hard enough and believe in what their hands can do. As the winter sun dipped low over the marble gates of Briarwood, Maya Hayes tucked the scholarship papers back into her satchel, not just to plan her own future, but to design a mentorship program for other kids who had once been told, "You can't," the way she had. This time they'd hear something different. She knew now the dream she once thought belonged only to her was bigger than any one person. It belonged to every teenager with grease under their nails, every girl told she didn't belong in a workshop, and every person who had ever been underestimated. The mechanic's daughter who once got laughed at for touching a Lamborghini had become the young engineer who would help others start their own engines. Because for Maya, and for those who follow, the open road was never the limit. It was only the beginning. The end, up next. 2 more powerful stories waiting for you. Click to keep driving with us, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe skills are worth fighting for.